All right, I want to let you know about something very important. How to get to heaven. This comes from another church, but this is a belief in many churches that some people get to heaven. In Unity, we have a universal approach. We understand that none are separate from God. Some of it who grew up in a different tradition. Okay. So a teacher was asking the children in her Sunday school class, if I sold my house and my car and had a big garage sale and gave all the money to the church, would that get me into heaven? The children said, no. And she said, well, if I cleaned the church every day and mowed the yard and kept everything neat and tidy, would I get into heaven then? The children said, no. And she said, well, then tell me, what do I need to do to get into heaven? And one little boy said, you got to die. I like it. In Unity, we teach that heaven and hell are states of consciousness that we can experience. How many of you experienced heaven today? I did during that last song. How many of you experienced a little hell? You don't have to raise your hands. Oh, some of you are raising your hands. It's a state of consciousness. That's what we understand. So, we're talking about how do you see the world? We see it through our consciousness. So that's what we're talking about today. I want to bring up this idea of a confirmation bias. Have you heard of this? Oh, I got to put my little thing on. There we go. Oh, so anyway, this is the world, right? Does that look familiar to you? You've seen this planet? That's how we see the world. Did you know they've discovered a new Earth-like planet? Have you heard about this? 35 million light years away? That's not it. This is Earth. Do you know what this is? It's looking from the south. And I just did this, like it's up. That's a perception that we have up and down when we look at the globe. That is just another view of our planet from the South Pole. But that is our home just as much. How do we see it? We see it through our perception. This is a little bit of the confirmation bias idea. Have you noticed that squares are always blue? And the other one says, oh, I know, it's so weird. You see, they saw the first two blue squares there and just make an assumption. Well, that's just the way squares are. Okay? They ignore all the other information. This is what confirmation bias does. It's a tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmation of one's existing beliefs or theories. You do it. All of us do it. We have an idea of what we think we're going to see, and then we see data, we see information, we see things happen in the world, and we go, well, see? We pay attention to the things that confirm what we already believe to be true, and we ignore the things that disagree with it. You don't think so? Okay. You're going to disagree with my perception, aren't you? Okay. So this is another one about, did you read my paper on confirmation bias? And the other says, yes, but it only proved what I already knew. And I like this one. Remember the Al Gore movie, An Inconvenient Truth? Everybody's going to a reassuring lie. I'm going to be, this first part of the talk, it comes from the field of moral psychology. This class, there is a class Cindy Wigglesworth is teaching right now at the Jung Center. Reverend Mindy and I have been part of that. It's happening on Monday evenings. We're halfway through the class, but she's teaching on this book by Jonathan Haidt called The Righteous Mind: Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. And it really is, it's got some interesting ideas. One of the things is it talks about he puts forward this moral foundations theory. And it says that not that we're hardwired, but we are pre-wired to see and experience things in specific ways. And he goes through these 5 main foundations, moral foundations, and it's a wonderful book. It's a little heady. We're not going to do all that. But you get the idea that what he's saying is that, and sometimes it comes when we're just babies, that some people are just sort of inclined to see the world in certain ways and others in other ways. Of these foundations, conservative political people they have a connection to all 6 of these, and liberal people only 2 in the way that they present political arguments. It's very fascinating stuff. I know, but we're not going into that tonight. Just if you're interested and you want to know more, get the book. It's really, really good. But there's one thing in the book that I wanted to talk about. When he talks about confirmation bias, and he cites the work of another researcher, and that is, let me find it here, Tom Gilovich. He studies the cognitive mechanisms of strange beliefs. His simple formulation is that when we want to believe something, we ask ourselves the question, can I believe it? And then we search for supporting evidence. And if we find even a single piece of pseudo-evidence, we can stop thinking. We now have permission to believe. We have a justification, just in case anybody asks. And in contrast, when we don't want to believe something, we ask ourselves, must I believe this? And then we search for contrary evidence, and if we find a single reason to doubt the claim, we can dismiss it. You only need one key to unlock the handcuffs of must. A little sobering, isn't it? What we're studying in the class is that our political divisions, we're getting more and more divided largely because of this very mechanism. That when we see information that challenges our beliefs, we look for any reason why we don't have to believe it. And if we look for any invitation that reconfirms what we already believe, the slightest bit of evidence, we go, see, I was right. This is not hardwired, but pre-wired in human brains. And just knowing about it, you can become aware and you can begin to question it a little bit more. And that's the point of this. We're not going to stay in moral psychology too long. I just wanted to give you that information. That our brains are wired to see the world in a particular way, and we can't always trust it. So, this is the question I want to ask. Really? Just simply, do you remember that from Amy Poehler and, what's his name? Seth? Yeah, we're just like, they had this, really? That was the whole thing was, really? I invite you, when you get a belief, something that's maybe a little charged for you around a politician, or a policy, or something that's happening in the world, and you get your belief confirmed, you maybe get a little self-righteous. Just ask yourself, really? Check your BS. You know what your BS is, right? Oh, it didn't work. It's supposed to say belief system now above it. We missed a slide. All right, anyway. It means belief system. We want to check your belief system. That's so weird. I know I had those words in there. Put whatever words you want. So, I want to move from the realm of moral psychology and brain science into the realm of spiritual reality and spiritual tools, because that's what we are. We are a spiritual community, and we seek to take up spiritual principles and practice them in our lives. And so knowing that we can't always believe our own press, we have to look at what is it in us that makes us see the world in certain ways. And we do teach in Unity, it is our BS, our belief systems. That we have a certain way. Here's an example of this. This comes from Mary Morrissey's teaching. How many of you believe the story, you got the story, that money doesn't grow on trees? Or a similar thing. You got to be careful with it. Or the early bird gets the worm. You got to get up there and work it. But good things come to those who wait. Which is it? These are just things that float around in human consciousness, human awareness, and human beliefs, and we inherit them. Bruce Lipton says that the first 6 years of life, you're getting a direct download from your family's belief system. You have no filter. Then the rest of your life in spirituality, we learn to heal all those things. And it's really strange, because if it only takes 6 years to get them all in there, it takes a lifetime to get them out, I find. But we walk around, we confirm these things, we act on these things, and it's like we get, let's say you do have a belief in lack and limitation. Most of us do, at least in some area. If you've ever struggled with finances, there may be a belief in there around lack and limitation. There's just not enough to go around, or maybe I'm not worthy of getting the good job, or maybe I'm just not able to create wealth in the way that I would like to. And so imagine whatever that is, and you begin to construct a lens for seeing the world through that glass of not enough. And so what do? You look around the world. Your credit card bill came a little higher than you thought it was going to. You don't remember the wonderful trip you took. You don't remember the amazing meal. What do you think? There's not enough money to pay it. You see it through the lens of your belief system. That's what we do. And so our work in spirituality, and especially in unity, is to begin to unwire those old beliefs and replace them with spiritual truth. What is the spiritual truth that goes against that belief in lack and limitation? Who's my prosperity students out here? Abundance. It's a nature. Abundance is the quality of God. It is part of reality. It's written into us. It is hardwired. We may have pre-wired belief systems to get us into thinking what the world thinks about it, but the world didn't give it to me and the world can't take it away. What we're talking about is the spiritual inheritance of who we are. And so we begin to find practices. We use prayer. We use affirmation. We begin to find ways that we can move our world, move our experience of the world into a better place. So I'm thinking about this as it relates to how we see the world. That we're seeing the world through our lens of not enough, through our lens of unworthiness, whatever those old beliefs in us are. And everyone else is doing the same thing. How do we shift it without becoming the spiritual bypass? You know what that word is? You know what that means? It's like when we just ignore the stuff that we don't want to look at, like the confirmation bias. How can we change the way we look at the world without going into denial? And so this is the question that I want to ask us tonight. Can we see God in an imperfect world? Oh, you're done? Okay, well, good night. Thank you. Here's what I've found. Folks in unity can sometimes fall into this utopian myth of the world. Well, it's the age of Aquarius. Now there's not going to be any more war. It's going to be peaceful from now on. Waiting for world peace. If you don't believe it, how many of you were around for 2012, the end of the Mayan calendar? I heard people in this church talking about it was the end of an old age and a new thing was going to happen, and people were expecting everything to be different. Sometimes we carry this idea that it's terrible now, but it's going to be great. We're all going to get on board. What I'm asking us to take up is the idea is that we can see God in the world just as it is. See it. Not ignoring the wars, not ignoring the bombings, not ignoring the hatred, and still see God present. How do we do that? In Jonathan Haidt's book, he talks about this. He said, "When I was a teenager, I wished for world peace. But now I yearn for a world in which competing ideologies are kept in balance. Systems of accountability keep us all from getting away with too much, and fewer people believe that righteous ends justify violent means." It's not a very romantic wish, but it's one that we might actually achieve. Now, he's a moral psychologist. He's not a unity student. I'm not saying that we give up the idea of peace as being available and on the planet. But what I'm trying to get us to do, what I'm asking us to open ourselves to the possibility that even in the world, incomplete and imperfect as we see it, God is still moving. Evolution is still occurring. Things are happening. Healing is part of what we're seeing, even when it looks heartbreaking. And this is difficult. This is grown-up spirituality. This is not just making an affirmation and then turning your head away. I talk about this all the time. Sometimes Ernest Holmes said it this way. I say this a lot. Our task is to stand in hell and declare heaven. And many of us are standing in hell going, "I don't see no flames. It's not hot in here. What are you talking about? It's fine. I'm affirming peace and joy. There's nothing wrong." Yeah, that doesn't work. It doesn't work to affirm something you don't believe is possible. Now, can we expand our possibility meter? Yes. And that's what I'm asking us to do. Can we see that even with the bombings of the churches in Cairo, that we can still see that the teachings of our way shower, Jesus Christ, are still present and still capable of rising above the hatred and bringing peace to the people in Egypt. That is what we're called to do. That is what I believe we're meant to do. We're supposed to see possibility in pain without becoming Pollyanna. Nothing wrong with Pollyanna. She's sweet. But Pollyanna would not look, the idea is, that's actually a really good movie. But in shorthand, what it means is someone who refuses to acknowledge difficulty, refuses to acknowledge struggle. That has never worked in my spiritual life. So I can actually acknowledge that I'm struggling right now, but I know God is bigger than my struggle. I can acknowledge that this is a tight place, because here's the thing, and Mindy and I were just talking about this before the service. If you don't acknowledge that healing needs to be done, healing doesn't get done. If you don't acknowledge that there's a prayer request, you're not even asking the right questions of the universe. I'm not saying we believe in the pain and the negativity and the sorrow and the heartbreak to the point that we identify with it solely, but we have to acknowledge that it's happening so that we know how to form our prayer. We know exactly the qualities of God to bring in, because this is happening at the level of the relative, at the level of the human. The spiritual truth of you doesn't know about it, but the human truth of you does. So I'm going to ask you, real quick, we're just going to do a little process together. So I invite you to find your breath. Just let all the air out of your body. Breathe in through your nose. Let that out on an audible sigh. Feel yourself become really present. I'm going to ask this question again, and just be with what arises in your mind. Can I see God in an imperfect world? Can we begin to see that even though there is temporary pain, there is temporary hatred, that somehow Spirit is being revealed, healing is occurring? Can you find that flame of possibility that God could even be revealing its perfect nature in an imperfect human world? And see if you can begin to get in touch with the sense of possibility, the sense of peace, the sense of trust, the process. And breathe into that. And this is the practice that we can see the imperfections of the world and still know there is a bigger reality. Now, before we finish this, I'm going to ask you one more thing. I'm going to ask you, can you see God in your own imperfections? Can you begin to see that in the own areas of your own life where you struggle, that God is trying to reveal something to you and through you? Can you begin to open to the possibility and the peace and the trust that everything is okay, even with not having enough money in the bank account, even with carrying the extra weight you don't want to, even with that diagnosis, even with the broken relationship? Can you begin to see that God is not anywhere outside of that? And hope is possible. Transformation is happening. Take a deep breath. Let it out, and you can open your eyes. And that's the last point I want to make tonight, is that we can see, we see the world as we see ourselves. That if we're willing to see ourselves as possible people, not perfect in the human realm. I love, some of the church has they're saying, they're on the side of their building, it says, "No perfect people allowed." We are all perfect in the universal, in the true absolute sense of who we are. But as we are here in these human lifetimes, none of us is perfect. But I want us to begin to see ourselves as possible people. And we don't get to really touch the possibility and the potential of God's transformative power and grace if we're unwilling to look at the problem. In the 12 steps, what is the first step? To admit we're powerless. Those who have done that journey with me, you know that's the way it works. Because the ego, the logical mind, the intellect will continue to keep trying to figure it out. Well, maybe if I only drink scotch, maybe that'll solve it. Maybe if I only, whatever it is for you, maybe if I only use the dollar slot machines, I won't have, my gambling problem will go away. I don't know what it is for you. We have to learn to be able to look square in the face at our human condition and just be there and then open to the possibility of transformation. So, when we can do this work for ourselves, we begin to see the world differently. When we heal our own lives, we begin to heal the world. We don't have to do anything different other than just be the light. 2 Corinthians 12:9 says, "My grace is sufficient for thee, my strength is made perfect in weakness." Philippians 4:13 says, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." Matthew 19:26 says, "With God all things are possible." What are these scriptures trying to show us? Yeah, they are awesome. But this is the key. With God, all things are possible. But some of us are not being with God. And I'm not talking about coming down to the front, doing an altar call and saying, getting on your knees and repenting. I'm not talking about being with God that way. I'm talking about is being aligned with the truth of the reality of your own being, which is the expression of God's own nature. I'm talking about being with God and that you're not going to believe those lies of the past, but you're going to begin to step into the truth of your authentic nature, which is power and presence and peace and joy. That's being with God. And am I going to act from a place of brokenness and separation, or am I going to act from a place of God? That's what we're called to do. That's what we're called to be. And so, as you know, it's not easy. We have to develop what we call spiritual double vision, that we can actually look at the human problem and see the divine potential. We have to be able to step into faith, into, it really is reality, the true reality of who we are. And we do it little bits at a time. How would a person of faith act when they got some distressing news? Would they just throw up their hands and say, "It's all over, kill me now"? Or would they begin to say, "Okay, I don't know how. I can feel my heart beating fast. I can feel my fear, but God is bigger than this." That's getting with God. In those moments, it's easy to be with God when your bills are paid, your boyfriend's acting right, and you're sitting on the side of a beautiful canyon at sunset. That's easy. We all feel that, and it's lovely. But can we get with God in our imperfections and in our struggles? Someone last week was asking me about this. How do we work with our belief systems? I said, I don't know how you're going to do it, but I'll tell you the way I do it. The two things. I understand that it's a practice, not a perfection. It's progress. Pray even though you feel like your prayers are not getting anywhere. Affirm even though you feel like your affirmations aren't working. You keep doing it. You keep practicing it. And the second thing is you do the practice in community. That's all I know to tell you. You come together with like-minded people. You get real with each other. You share what's going on, and you pray for each other. You hold each other's hands when you're crying. You get a hug. That's how I did it. And I'll tell you, not that I'm all that cute now, but I'm not that perfect. You know what I mean? I still got things I'm working on. But if you could have seen me 25 years ago, if you knew the life, the belief system I was operating under then, you can't get here from there. I could never have vision mapped it or whatever that is. I would not have known. But what I did was I practiced the principles as simple and as painstaking as I knew to do it, and I did it with good people, imperfect people. And time went by, and things got healed when it got better. So there are two things. Again, spiritual double vision. You are both a masterpiece and a work in progress. There's no two ways about it. Well, there are exactly two ways about it. You are perfect in the spiritual sense, and you are imperfect and improving in the human. And that's just got to be okay. And if you can get okay with just being human, I mean, I was really waiting. Do you remember that? Anybody else have that idea? Like it was like, well, one day I'm going to have it together enough that then my life will begin. One day I'll have the right job or the relationship or something, and then it'll start. Right? Yeah. This is it. This is your life. This is your story. This is how you got here. This is where you are, and it's perfect in its imperfection. You are worthy of receiving the life of your dreams. You are worthy of having your life transform into the light of the world that you truly are. And that's what I want to leave you with, is this. That when you begin to be that possible person, you walk a little differently. You greet the people you see on the street a little differently. And that's how we transform the planet. I love you. You're amazing. God bless you.